Serafina is at her kitchen table. Cold food in front of her. Renovation invoices spread across the surface like a losing hand of cards. Her phone lights up. It's Wyatt Finch, her builder. And he never calls past 7. His voice is flat. Careful. The kind of careful that means something has already happened that can't be undapped. Serafina. Come to the house. Tonight. Don't call your parents. She doesn't ask why. Something in the silence between his words tells her the answer would change everything. 2 police cruisers in the yard. Wyatt on the porch steps, work gloves twisted in both hands, face doing something she'd never seen a builder's face do. And beneath a torn-up section of the kitchen floor, wrapped in oilcloth sealed with a combination lock, dusty with years of waiting, a fireproof box the size of a boot crate. Across the lid, in ink faded but unmistakable. For Serafina. Only Serafina. Before I tell you what was inside that box, before I tell you what it cost my grandfather to hide it, and what it cost my family when we found it, I need to take you back to the beginning. To the family dinners. To the will reading. To the moment I stood in a crumbling house and decided that a broken inheritance was still worth fighting for. My name is Ephraim Mills. I am 26 years old. And this is the story of how my grandfather loved me quietly for decades, and made sure that love had teeth. Serafina describes the house first, a large craftsman colonial in Millbrook, Connecticut, the kind of house that looks warm from the street and runs cold from the inside. Her father, Ephraim Mills, built 3 commercial properties in this county. He talks about legacy the way some men talk about religion, constantly, loudly, and mostly for the benefit of whoever is listening. Her mother, Kathleen Mills, sits to Marmon's right. Press blouse. Careful smile. The kind of woman who manages her image the way a gardener manages a hedge, nothing allowed to grow past the shape she designed. Her brother, Isaac Mills, 29, is across the table. He is everything this family decided to be proud of. The business degree. The junior partnership at Marmon's development firm. The easy laugh that fills rooms Serafina has always felt invisible in. And then there is Serafina. Far end of the table. Closest to the kitchen. A social worker at a nonprofit that helps elderly residents navigate housing disputes. A job her father once described, in front of company, as Serafina's little project. Isaac announces he's closing a commercial lease deal in Hartford. Marmon sets down his fork like a man accepting an award on someone else's behalf. Kathleen raises her glass. Serafina waits for a pause. She tells them about a 73-year-old woman she helped keep in her home of 40 years after a predatory sublease almost pushed her out. Kathleen says, "That's sweet, honey," and turns back to Isaac before Serafina finishes the sentence. Marmon doesn't look up. Serafina clears the table after dinner. No one asks her to. No one asks her to stay either. On the drive home, she calls her grandfather. Ephraim Mills answers before the second ring the way he always does, like he's been waiting, which she has come to understand he usually is. He asks about the woman she helped. He asks the woman's name. He asks how her cat is doing. Her grandfather is 81 years old and he remembers things her own parents don't bother to learn. She describes Ephraim's house on the edge of Doolin Creek. A 2-story craftsman built in 1961, surrounded by oaks, smelling permanently of cedar and strong coffee. It has been flagged by the county for plumbing issues. The porch lists slightly to the east. Ephraim calls this the house settling into its opinion. Serafina is 19 in this memory. She's sitting on Ephraim's porch after a particularly brutal family dinner, one of the ones where Marmon announced Isaac's college scholarship at the table, and nobody thought to mention that Serafina had also been accepted somewhere, just without funding. Ephraim sits beside her for 3 hours. He doesn't fill the silence with advice or reasons or perspective. He just stays. Before she leaves, he takes her hand. He gives her 4 numbers. He tells her to memorize them. He tells her not to write them down. "These are yours, sweetheart. Don't give them to anyone." She asks what they're for. "Someday," he says, "you'll know." She assumed it was one of his old man mysteries. A habit, a combination to something already forgotten. She memorized the numbers anyway. The way you store something you love, even when you don't understand it yet. 3 months after that phone call, Ephraim Mills dies quietly on a Tuesday morning in March. A nurse calls at 6:42. Serafina drives to the hospital in the dark, shoes on the wrong feet, hands gripping the wheel. By the time she arrives, her father's car is already in the lot. Isaac is leaning against the wall in the corridor, scrolling his phone. Kathleen is speaking in low tones to a man in a gray blazer Serafina has never seen before. Nobody looks up when she walks past them to say goodbye. The office is beige and cold. A conference table too large for 5 people. Haskins, silver-haired, precise, papers always already arranged, opens his folder without greeting anyone properly. Serafina sits across from Isaac. Kathleen and Marmon are side by side at the head. The family unit, minus Serafina, forms a quiet triangle she has never been inside. Haskins reads, to Marmon Mills, control of the Ephraim Mills estate account, valued at $2.1 million, including all liquid assets and investment holdings. Marmon nods once. The nod of a man who already knew. To Isaac Mills, the Ashford Avenue commercial property, and the associated portfolio. Isaac doesn't smile. He doesn't need to. The room is already arranged in his favor. To Serafina Mills, the residential property at 4 Doolin Creek Road, Cold Spring, Connecticut. Silence. Haskins closes the folder. Everyone at that table knows what 4 Doolin Creek Road is. The roof that held water last winter. The foundation that shifted 6 years ago and was never properly addressed. The plumbing the county flagged. The electrical the county condemned. Marmon turns toward her. His expression is even. Rehearsed. Your grandfather understood your situation, Serafina. He gave you something you could manage. Kathleen folds her hands. At least it's real property. Not everyone gets that. Isaac says nothing. He is already reading something on his phone. Serafina looks at Haskins. My grandfather told me he would take care of me. He said it to my face. More than once. Marmon leans forward. Are you saying your grandfather lied? The room goes still. Serafina stands. She takes her coat. She does not cry in front of them. That is the one thing she refuses to give them. She sits in her car for 9 minutes. Her hands are pressed flat against her thighs to stop the trembling. Then she thinks of something. 4 Doolin Creek Road. The house Ephraim grew up in. The house he sat on the porch of when he gave her 4 numbers and told her not to write them down. The house he used to stare at sometimes, like the walls were remembering something he wasn't ready to say out loud. The house settling into its opinion. She starts the car. The craftsman is worse than she remembered from the outside. Weeds to her knees. 3 windows cracked. The front door groans like it resents being opened. Inside, dust, mildew, soft floorboards, and silence. But in the kitchen, behind a film of grime on the wall, is a framed photograph. Small, slightly tilted. A young man and a young woman standing in front of this house when it was freshly painted and proud. The yard behind them is clean. They're smiling. On the back, in ink faded with decades. For when she's ready. Serafina places the photograph carefully on the counter. Then she calls a builder named Wyatt Finch. 3 days later Marmon calls. I'll take it off your hands. $15,000 cash. You walk away with something. $15,000 for the house her grandfather grew up in. No, she says. The line goes quiet. When Marmon speaks again, his voice has dropped half a register. You're making this harder than it has to be. She hangs up. That same evening Isaac calls. First time in months. Why are you making this complicated? Take the money. Move on. Grandpa wouldn't have left me a ruin, Isaac. You know that. A pause she can't read. Just take the money, Serafina. She ends the call and stares at the photograph on her kitchen counter for a long time. Wyatt Finch arrives the following Monday morning. He is 44, deliberate in his movements, the kind of man who touches walls the way doctors take pulses, with full attention and no hurry. He walks every room before he speaks. He presses his boot against floor sections. He knocks on walls and listens to what they say back. On the porch he removes his cap. 60 to 70,000 minimum. Could run higher if the foundation shifted more than it looks. Serafina has 29,000 in savings and a credit line she has never touched. Together it is not enough. She tells him she'll make it work. Wyatt studies her face for a moment. All right, he says. I'll cut where I can. She is at the house every evening after work. She learns the sounds of it, which boards creak, which windows stick, which corners hold cold air even on warm days. She begins to feel that her grandfather is present in the structure itself, in the decisions he made about where to put a window or how to frame a doorway. The house is full of him. She finds small things as the crew works. A coffee tin behind the back wall of a closet, empty but still smelling faintly of grounds. A child's drawing tucked beneath old linoleum in the upstairs hallway. A house, a tree, a figure with a large hat. Signed in crayon, Ephraim, age 7. She places everything on the kitchen counter. Evidence of a life lived inside these walls. 8 days in, Wyatt calls her over to the living room. "This wall's wrong," he says, pressing his palm flat against the plaster. "It's doubled. 2 separate frames with a gap between them. Somebody built this on purpose." Serafina stares at the shadow behind the framing where Wyatt's flashlight reaches. "Open it," she says. Wyatt looks at her. "Whoever did this didn't want it found easily." "It's my house, Wyatt." He picks up the sledgehammer. That same week, her credit union calls. A man identifying himself as her father contacted them, requesting details on her outstanding loan. They didn't release information, but they wanted her to know. Serafina sits with that for a long time. They are not just waiting for her to fail. They are working to make sure she does. She calls Wyatt that night. "Speed up," she says. "Every wall. All of them." A pause. "You expecting something?" "My grandfather told me the house had a memory. I want to know what it remembers." She sits on the floor of the living room that night, surrounded by exposed framing and electrical wire. She reads a text from Kathleen, 3 paragraphs long, full of the language of sacrifice and family, and closes it without answering. She thinks about what it means to be the person a family underestimates so completely that they forget to be careful around you. She thinks her grandfather might have counted on exactly that. The call comes on a Thursday evening. 9:47. Serafina is on her apartment floor sorting receipts when the phone lights up. "Wyatt. This late?" "Wrong." His voice is compressed. "You need to come to the house. Tonight." "I already called the police." "Don't contact your family." "What did you find?" "I can't explain it over the phone." "Just come." 22 minutes away. She drives it in 14. 2 cruisers in the yard. Red and blue through the oak trees. Wyatt on the porch steps, cap in both hands, pale in the porch light. 2 officers inside. 1 photographing, 1 watching with arms folded. The kitchen floor has been torn back to the original subfloor. Beneath a section near the old cast iron sink, the crew found a hollow space deliberately framed. Not rot, not accident, but design. And inside it, wrapped in oilcloth sealed with wax cord. A fireproof lockbox. Bootbox size. Covered in the particular dust of something that has been waiting a very long time. Across the lid, in ink faded but completely readable. "For Serafina." Only Serafina. She kneels. Her fingers hover above the lock. 4 digits. She enters the numbers her grandfather gave her on a porch at 19. The numbers he told her never to share. The numbers she memorized and carried for 7 years without knowing what door they opened. The lock releases. She lifts the lid. First compartment. A sealed envelope. Inside, 4 pages of ruled paper in Ephraim's handwriting. Dated 14 months before his death. Witnessed by 2 names she doesn't recognize. Stamped by a notary. At the top of the first page, "Last will and testament of Ephraim Doolin Mills." She reads. Her hands are shaking, but her voice, when she reads aloud for the officers, does not shake. Serafina Mills inherits everything. The estate account. The Ashford Avenue property. All liquid assets. All holdings. Marmon receives $1. Isaac receives $1. A single line at the bottom, in Ephraim's unmistakable cursive. "So they understand I remembered them clearly. I simply did not trust them anymore." Second compartment. A second sealed envelope. 18 months of bank statements printed and folded. Each page annotated in pencil in her grandfather's hand. Withdrawals he did not authorize. Power of attorney documents bearing signatures forensic analysis will later confirm he never wrote. A running total, circled and underlined at the bottom of the final page. $340,000. Gone across 19 months. Third compartment. A small voice recorder. Across the front, A strip of masking tape with 2 words in black marker. Play alone. One of the officers steps forward. That one, we'd recommend a lawyer first. Some of what's on it may be classified as evidence. Serafina slowly pulls her hand back. But she already knows, from the weight of the recorder, from the care with which her grandfather sealed it, that whatever is on it will be the thing that cannot be undone. She stays a long time after the officers document everything. Wyatt stays too, leaning in the doorway saying nothing. Finally she asks, "Did you know something was here?" Wyatt is quiet for a moment. 2 months before he passed, your grandfather asked me over for coffee. He told me if anything happened, I should make sure you fixed the kitchen floor yourself. A pause. He didn't tell me what was there. Just that you'd know what to do when you found it. Serafina presses the will against her chest. The paper carries a faint scent, cedar and coffee. The smell of every room he ever lived in.
3 days after the lockbox is found, Serafina sits across from an attorney named Lorelei Brock. Lorelei is 47, unhurried, with the kind of reputation that arrives before she does. She has not lost a probate fraud case in 11 years. Serafina talks for 12 minutes without stopping. Lorelei listens without writing anything down. When Serafina finishes, Lorelei sets her pen flat on the desk. Your grandfather didn't just leave you a house. He built you a case. Come back tomorrow with everything. The voice recorder contains a single audio file, 41 minutes long. Recorded according to the timestamp, 11 months before Ephraim's death. The first voice is Marmon. Serafina recognizes the register, controlled, quiet, the voice he uses when he's already decided something, and is informing the room rather than discussing it. He outlines the estate plan. Not Ephraim's estate plan. His own. How the trust would be reclassified. How the power of attorney documents would be signed, while Dad's having a harder week, before he thinks to question it. How Haskins would file the new will 3 days after the death, before anyone had time to ask questions. Then Isaac's voice. Serafina has to press her hand flat against her knee to keep still. Isaac doesn't lead the conversation. He doesn't initiate anything, but he listens. He agrees. He says, just make sure Serafina doesn't ask too many questions. And then, the detail that turns her stomach completely. He asks how much the Ashford Avenue property will be worth after 3 years of appreciation. 11 months before her grandfather was in the ground. Isaac was calculating his return. This recorder, combined with the forged authorization documents and the annotated bank records, constitutes a complete federal case. Bank fraud, elder financial abuse, conspiracy, forgery of legal instruments. She pauses. Your grandfather knew exactly what he was doing. He recorded this because he knew they'd deny everything. He gave you the proof before they could take it. Serafina is quiet for a moment. He was alone in that house while this was happening. They were taking from him while he made them coffee. Lorelei's expression doesn't change, but something in her eyes settles. Yes, she says. And he chose not to collapse. He chose to document. Word travels fast in a small Connecticut county. Someone saw the police cars at Doolin Creek. Someone told someone. By the time the story reaches Marmon, it has grown enough that he cannot ignore it. He calls that evening. No greeting. Whatever you think you found in that house means nothing, Serafina. I have the best legal team in this county. She doesn't raise her voice. Grandpa thought of that too, Dad. The line goes quiet for 4 full seconds. She continues steady. I have the original will. The bank records. The forged signatures. The recording. The FBI is reviewing everything now. You can stop this or all of it becomes public. Your choice. Marmon says. You have no idea what you're starting. I didn't start it, she says. You did. Grandpa just made sure I'd be able to finish it. She hangs up. Kathleen calls 20 minutes later. Her voice is soft, breaking in all the right places. She talks about family, about grief, about how Serafina is being influenced by strangers who don't understand them. Your grandfather loved all of us, Serafina. You're twisting his memory. Serafina lets her finish. Good night, Mom. She ends the call, sets the phone face down on the table, and sits in the quiet of the half-restored Doolin Creek kitchen. Through the new windows Wyatt's crew installed last week, she can see the creek in the dark, moving steady and different. Her grandfather used to say the creek had been there longer than any of them, and would be there long after. He said patience was not a weakness. It was the only strategy that never ran out. She thinks he was right. Her phone screen lights up once more. A text from Isaac. No punctuation. No context. You'll regret this, Serafina. She reads it once. Sets the phone down again. In the morning, she calls Lorelei and tells her to file everything. The federal courthouse in Hartford rises from the street, the way federal buildings do. As if architecture itself is designed to remind you that some things are larger than family grudges. Serafina parks 4 blocks away and walks. Outside the entrance, Marmon stands with 2 attorneys in matching dark suits. He is speaking to a local reporter, calm and composed. "We're confident the truth will come out today," he says into the recorder. Kathleen stands a few feet back, clutching a tissue, speaking to a woman from their church. "All I ever wanted was for our family to stay together." Serafina walks past both of them and through the doors without slowing. Inside, Lorelei Brock is waiting. Beside her, the FBI forensic liaison, a woman named Glenda Voss, who spent 6 weeks analyzing every document in the lockbox, has her briefcase open and her materials organized. "Ready?" Lorelei asks. "Yes," Serafina says. Judge Miriam Cross takes the bench. Silver-haired, economical with language, the kind of judge who writes notes slowly, which means she writes notes that last. Lorelei stands and begins without theater. "Your Honor, this case begins with a death and a plan. The plan preceded the death by at least 14 months. Behind her, the projector displays 2 documents side by side. The fraudulent will filed by Clovis Haskins 3 days after Ephraim's death. The original handwritten will, recovered from the Doolin Creek property, dated 14 months earlier. Witnessed. Notarized. Sealed by Ephraim's own hand. The document filed by Mr. Haskins was not written by Ephraim Mills," Lorelei continues. She clicks the remote. FBI forensic analysis fills the screen. 99.4% probability, the signature does not belong to the deceased. A sound moves through the gallery. Serafina doesn't turn around. Glenda Voss takes the stand and walks through the annotated statements with the patience of someone who has done this many times and understands that juries, and judges, need to feel the numbers, not just hear them. $340,000. 19 months. Each transfer authorized by a document bearing Ephraim's signature. Each signature confirmed fraudulent by handwriting analysis. Each page annotated in Ephraim's own pencil with the words, "I did not sign this. This is not my hand." She presents the originals, side by side with confirmed Ephraim signatures from documents he personally filed during the same period. The difference is visible to anyone looking. Lorelei addresses the judge. "Your Honor, the plaintiff requests permission to play an audio recording recovered from the property, confirmed authentic by FBI forensic audio analysis." Judge Cross. "Proceed." The courtroom goes completely still as the recording begins. Marmon's voice fills the room. Controlled. Methodical. Outlining the transfer of power of attorney documents during a harder week. The coordination with Haskins. The timing of the will filing. The estate account reclassification. Then Isaac's voice. Serafina watches the back of her brother's head. His shoulders stiffen. His attorney reaches toward him. He shakes the hand away. "Just make sure Serafina doesn't ask too many questions." The courtroom stays silent after the recording ends. One reporter's pen is still midair. Marmon's lead attorney stands. "Objection, Your Honor, chain of custody." Lorelei. The chain of custody documentation is already submitted as Exhibit F. The recording was recovered by law enforcement, logged, sealed, and transferred to FBI forensic analysis within 48 hours of discovery. Judge Cross. Overruled. Continue. At recess, Serafina steps into the corridor. She hears footsteps behind her. Fast, purposeful. She turns. Isaac stands 3 feet away. His face is not the face of the brother who texted 4 cold words 3 weeks ago. It is the face of someone standing at the edge of something they cannot step back from. "I want to talk to the prosecutor," he says. His voice is quiet, stripped of everything. Serafina studies him. "Why?" "Because I knew more than I told them I knew." He doesn't look away. "And because he was my grandfather too." She doesn't forgive him in the hallway. She doesn't tell him it's all right. But she steps aside and lets him walk toward Lorelei's colleague. Judge Cross takes 9 minutes. She returns to the bench, adjusts her glasses, and reads from her prepared statement without pause. The fraudulent will is declared void. The original handwritten will is recognized as the sole valid testament of Ephraim Doolin Mills. Marmon Mills is remanded to federal custody. Charges: forgery of legal documents, bank fraud, elder financial abuse, conspiracy. Kathleen Mills is remanded. Charges: conspiracy to commit fraud. Clovis Haskins is charged with aiding and abetting the preparation of fraudulent legal documents. His license is suspended immediately pending formal proceedings. Total estate recovery, including the drained trust funds, returned to Serafina. $2.8 million. The gavel falls once. Clean and final. The marshals move toward the defense table. Handcuffs click around Marmon's wrists. He turns and looks at Serafina, not with anger, with the expression of a man who ran a calculation and got the answer wrong. Kathleen is still speaking to the marshals, to the room, to anyone. Her voice echoes and finds no one. Serafina picks up the small voice recorder from the evidence table, returned to her after proceedings, and presses it once against her chest. Her grandfather's fingerprints are still on it. She puts it in her bag and walks out. Marmon Mills enters a federal facility in Danbury. 8 years. Kathleen receives 4, with eligibility for supervised release after 22 months. Clovis Haskins receives 3 years and permanent disbarment. Isaac accepts a cooperation agreement and a reduced charge, community service, probation, full financial disclosure. He gives up everything he received from the estate without being asked twice. Lorelai calls Serafina with the final numbers on a Wednesday afternoon. Total recovered: $2.8 million. Serafina says nothing for a moment. It was never about the money, she finally says. I know, Lorelai replies. That's exactly why you won. 6 months after the trial, Wyatt Finch drives a final nail into the last baseboard in the living room. The same room where the false wall once stood. The same room where the kitchen floor was torn open to find what her grandfather left behind. He runs his hand along the finished wood. Stands. Brushes dust from his knees. 22 years in this work, he says quietly. This one I'll remember. The Doolin Creek house is new again. White oak hardwood floors, same species as the original 1961 installation. Fresh plaster. Windows that open without argument. A kitchen with a gas stove, ceramic tile, and a hook by the door where Ephraim's old guest book now hangs. Blank pages waiting. On the living room wall, where the false wall used to be, Serafina hangs 3 photographs. First, the original photo from behind the kitchen grime. The young couple in front of this house when it was freshly painted and proud. Second, a photograph she found in Ephraim's bedroom drawer during the renovation. Ephraim at approximately 35, standing in the yard of this house, laughing at something off camera, holding a child on his hip. The child is Serafina, age 2, face turned away from the camera, small hand pressed flat against his cheek. Third, a new photograph taken last week. Serafina and Wyatt on the finished porch, both of them looking at something in the yard, both of them almost smiling. 3 weeks after sentencing, a letter arrives. Handwritten. 3 pages. The envelope smells of the perfume Kathleen has worn for 30 years. Serafina reads it at the kitchen table. Morning light through the new windows. Kathleen writes about fear. About Marmon's control over every financial decision for decades. About learning early that silence was survival, and how survival eventually became who she was. She writes that she loved Ephraim, and that the way he looked at her made her ashamed, because he saw her clearly and she couldn't stand it. The apology on the final page sounds, for possibly the first time, like a real one. Serafina folds it. She does not throw it away. But she also does not call. She writes back 1 page. Mom, I read it. I believe parts of it are true. But understanding why something happened is not the same as it being acceptable. I'm not carrying anger anymore. But I'm also not available. That boundary is permanent. I wish you healing. That's the most honest thing I can offer. She seals the envelope. Walks to the mailbox at the end of Doolin Creek Road. Drops it in. Walks back without waiting to hear it land. Isaac calls once. He doesn't ask for forgiveness. He doesn't offer explanations. I'm selling the apartment, he says. Whatever's left after the legal costs, I want to put toward the community center. A long pause. I'm not asking you to trust me, he adds. I just want to do something that would have made him less ashamed of me. Serafina is quiet for a moment. Then start there, she says. She doesn't tell him it's forgiven, but she doesn't close the door either. Her grandfather would have understood the difference. 1 year after the trial, on a Saturday morning in early October, Serafina stands beside a hand-painted wooden sign mounted above the entrance of the renovated farmhouse adjacent to the Doolin Creek property. Ephraim Mills Community Resource Center. Free legal aid for elderly residents facing financial abuse. Housing advocacy. Support groups for adults navigating family estate disputes. Mentorship for young women learning to move through systems not built with them in mind. Wyatt's crew did the renovation. He billed her for materials only. Pearl Turlow, 83, the woman Serafina helped keep in her home 3 years ago, the woman her father called Serafina's little project, cuts the ribbon. Her hands shake. She laughs about it. Ephraim would have done this faster, she says. But he would have cried the whole way through. The crowd laughs softly. Someone near the back is already crying. Lorelai Brock stands by the entrance with her arms folded, watching. When Serafina catches her eye, she gives a single nod. Serafina steps to the small podium. My grandfather hid the truth inside a wall because he had no safe place to say it out loud. This center exists so no one in this county ever has to hide what is happening to them again. It is not a monument to what was done wrong. It is a door that will always be open for people who are trying to find their way back to what is right. That evening, after everyone has gone and the center is quiet, Serafina sits on the porch of 14 Doolin Creek Road. 1 mug of decaf. The creek audible in the darkness below the tree line. The fireflies just beginning. She looks down at her wrist. The silver bracelet her grandfather gave her when she was 19, thin, plain. Something her mother once called unremarkable. Catches the last edge of daylight. Her mother wasn't wrong about the bracelet. It is plain. It is ordinary. But inside the clasp where no one thought to look, for numbers are engraved so small you need a magnifying glass to read them. The 4 numbers he told her never to share. The 4 numbers that opened the lock. The 4 numbers that meant, I saw you. I planned for you. I trusted you with everything I had left. She closes her hand around the bracelet. Holds it. The metal is warm. She thinks about a conversation people have sometimes, about whether justice is ever truly possible when the people responsible are the ones closest to you. Whether the truth, once buried that deep, can ever surface intact. Whether a person can rebuild something that was taken before they even knew it was gone. Her grandfather spent the last 4 years of his life answering those questions from the inside of a crumbling craftsman house on a creek in Connecticut. His answer was yes, but it would require patience. It would require a person who refused to become small, and it would require someone who loved the house enough to tear out every broken wall until the truth had somewhere to stand. She finishes her coffee. The creek keeps moving. The fireflies keep rising. She stays on the porch until she can't see them anymore.